right?
Way, yeah, short for Conway. I always went by Way.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Lindley.
Um, yes, yes. What what got you started on this journey? I know I saw a couple clips or a couple things on your YouTube channel, but if I was to share who you are with anyone, what kind of started this for you?
Ooh, well, short version or long version? Uh,
Whatever you feel called.
yeah, that was just kind of spontaneous, honestly. I mean, there was like a brief little period of like intellectually seeking information that kind of led to um, what most people would label like a Kundalini type energy arising, and that actually happened randomly. I was reading the Bible after having like a different kind of context for where Jesus was speaking from, kind of more of a just had a brief introduction. I wasn't even really familiar with at the time, like non duality or anything like that. But it kind of came across. I think I'd watched a couple of documentaries, like Inner Worlds, Outer Worlds. That was one of them specifically. There were some Masonic texts that I came across. I'm not a Mason. My grandfathers were, but I wasn't. I was never involved in that. Um, but I came across that information and was reading and looking into it and was like, okay, well, this it just kind of clicked in place that this was the context he was speaking from, and made a lot of sense, and just was really into that just as information. Like, all right, well, what's the truth as far as that goes? And I was sitting in the bedroom reading, and as I read a certain verse, and I'm saying it's because of the verse, it just happened to be that verse I was reading. Um, the disciples, they asked why he spoke in parables, and he said, it's not for right now, it's not for you to understand, but at a later date you'll understand. And as I was reading this, it was like just boom, there was like this huge rush, like in and outside, that really that what do they call it, the toroidal kind of flow of that. It's like the energy coming from oneself and out and permeating everything. It was like that was the experience. And my background prior to this, I was in 12-step movement and stuff. I had a past of drug addiction and had gotten clean some years before that. So I've done as far as like psychedelics and drug. I was a IV drug user for years, and as far as those types of experiences, I've done everything under the sun and had these intense euphoric experiences and things, and immediately all that just kind of paled in comparison. It was just like a joke. It was like obvious this was just like a sad attempt to mimic that, and it was very intense and profound, but like there was this blanket of peace that was there, that was prevalent in that. And so that came up. And also there was like this cool thing with like simultaneously, I was, like I said, I was reading, so I had the Bible there still, and I could see it was like if I'm looking at a basic mathematical equation, like if you see like 2 + 2 = 4, the mind can't even, it doesn't even try to, like, you don't have to think about that. It's like you see that on a piece of paper, you're like, all right, cool, check. That checks out. That's true. That's right. Um, and certain scriptures, it was like I could see that, and it was just as simple as that. I was like, okay, well, this is obviously true. This is obviously correct in that sense. And there was no like attempt, no need to even try to refute or like compute anything in that. That's just what was seen. Um, and yeah, there was, so like immediately, I mean, just like kind of broke down. Like I remember getting down like on my knees, just like amazed, and like, oh my God, just like in that. And there was some stuff that when I went outside, and this kind of was like, I don't know, time was kind of weird. So I went outside, and I had this little bench and this little kind of garden area in the backyard where I lived at the time. I went out there and I sat on this bench, and I'm just like sitting there, and it was springtime, and I was just, sitting there like in it, and this little bee just like flew up, and it was just like suspended, like outside, like in and outside of time, with everything, and it was so like clear in that moment, and in that it was like God was ever present as all things, and for that to not be was an impact. Like that had always been the case, always would be the case. For that to not be was a complete impossibility. And yeah, and then I was just in that for a while, and then it was like the only way I can describe it. It was like then the egoic mind caught up. It's like it jumped back in, and it's like, okay, what the hell's going on? Is this genuine, or are you losing your shit? Settle down, chief. Like all that kind of crept back in. Like you need to figure this out. You need to know what's going on. It's just like, and there was a period, like a couple-day period after that, of just diving into prophecy, because all I had still was this biblical context of that, and I did have certain things that came through with like past lives and reincarnation. There's a couple scriptures that stuff like that's talked about, and so it was like some of that I could see, and I started having what I didn't have this term at the time, but like downloads of like information that just clicked into place. It was like all of a sudden, just like boom, like the main one that stands out was like to do with like planetary energy and clearing, and how that was intrinsically tied to belief systems to keep certain like fear-based mentality in place, and like how this kind of like backlog, how this had to essentially be broken through and be processed for humanity collectively as a whole, and how that was tied in. And I didn't really have much of a context for this, so it's like, okay, cool. And
And you found this through reading the Bible as well?
no, this was just coming in. This was kind of non-linear, just like downloads at the time, just
Okay.
non-linear information that kind of just seemed to like click in place like a little puzzle piece, and it was the obvious same thing, like kind of the same resonance. So it's just like when it came in, the obviousness of like trying to refute it was stupid. It just fit so organically, and the information was so clear in that way. So but I
You're
didn't
really
really.
good at you're really good at describing this, by the way. Like I've experienced this. I know people that have experienced it, but you're very good at like describing how that energy moves through. And yeah, it's fascinating to hear you describe this.
Yeah, I mean, it took. I wouldn't have been, certainly wouldn't have been able to then or at certain times. But
How long ago was that? Sorry, before.
that was in spring of 2019. So yeah,
Okay.
about yeah, 5.5 years ago, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, yeah, feel free, because like I said, I didn't know if I was going to go long version or short version, but that was yeah, that was the flow. And then it like, I mean, it was overwhelming, because then I still just had this biblical context, and was like, that was my background. I grew up in church. Not Parents weren't super religious, but like we went to went to church weekly. I grew up going to Sunday school and all that stuff. Um, and always like, I like to read and like take things in context always, like even as a kid. And it was like certain things just didn't jive. It was like, all right, well, you're taking that out of context, like this contradicts that. And it's all that, so that wasn't. I'd stepped away when I first got clean and sober. I'd gotten to church, and just kind of, because that was my background, and I tried to do that for a couple of years, and then it ended up stepping away from that. And but anyhow, so that was what I had, and I was trying to look into that still, and diving into like prophecies in the Old Testament and Revelations, and that stuff kind of weird, kind of sticky, and yeah, there was like this the context for reincarnation had clicked in, and like that there were some downloads and readings and scriptures that kind of tied in. I could see the truth of, and so I was like, okay. But then there was like a real grandiose, like kind of latching of the ego into like grandiosity, specialness. Oh, what is my purpose? Oh my God, am I like, one of these prophets reincarnated at the end of times? Am I Jesus reincarnated? That was like another thing came. It's like, oh, I kind of knew like it's like everybody's Jesus or Christ reincarnated. It's just like, waiting on them to step into that. And so that kind of clicked in, and there was an awareness of that. But yeah, there was like like I said, there was like once the mind or the egoic mind kind of tried to latch back hold, there was a couple-day period of just like, all right, it was got real manic. Like it would have been diagnosed as like a manic episode. And like, I mean, I was like, I could have had flow charts out, like you see like they got the meme from It's Always Sunny, and that, I mean, that would have been the case. And my partner at the time, who I was living with, she was like, I wasn't telling her everything that was going on, like everything, but like I told her enough, and she's like, all right, yeah, okay, whatever, And so it was it got weird for a couple of days, to say the least. And it was like I was just like, I had enough clarity by grace to know it was just like all these different potentialities and timelines and scenarios and possibilities and like all this. And it was like, all right, just completely ungrounded. And had enough clarity to know, though, like, all right, well, some of this is possible, but it's not all possible simultaneously. And like, you got to find somebody to talk to, preferably somebody that's not going to try to have you committed. So, by grace, I ended up, I had a good friend from childhood that had moved to the upstate a couple of years before. And what's funny is I had just, he got like into a program, a recovery program, and had a sponsor up there that I remember him saying a few years ago directly how he described this guy. He was like, you might think he's Buddhist or Hindu or something, but he studies all religions and he's enlightened. And, at the time, I'm just like, okay, you like your sponsor. Cool. That's great. I'm happy for you. Didn't think anything into it at all. And my buddy had just called me like 2 weeks before this, was in jail because he had relapsed and been back out, like, involved in crime and stuff, and wanted somebody to bail him out. And I almost didn't get him out, but I remember like the direct simple thought was like, well, would you want him to get you out? And it was like, oh, well, yeah, so it's like I bailed him out and sent him the money to get him out. And yeah, sure enough, that was who I called. I was like, hey man, do you still have that sponsor? Are you still in touch with him? And he was like, well, no, but he ended up moving up into an ashram up into the mountains. And I didn't know what an ashram was. I don't even think he said ashram at the time. He ended up, he definitely did not, now that I think about it. Maybe he did, but I don't think so. And he was like, yeah, but he just started, like that's what he's doing or teaching, and he's working with people. And I was like, well, will he, if he'll talk to me, or, I remember asking, because I went to Barnes and Nobles in this flow, and it's really funny. So I go to Barnes and Nobles, and like, I'm in the like Eastern religion, I think it was probably lumped together at the time, like New Age, Eastern religion section. And I ended up with a copy of the Upanishads. And so I had no clue what that was. And I remember like I read this intro, and it was just explaining, I got a copy of the one, I don't think it's in here, but in the intro of this one translation, it's got like a breakdown of like kind of the perspective of the rishis that they say, wrote that, because they don't know the author of the Upanishads, but it's just subscribed to like the certain rishis and teachers of old. And so it gives like a little breakdown of them and like their state of consciousness. And it was like when I remember reading this and I'm like, oh my God, like I wrote this or something, like, that was like the feeling, the flow. And so anyhow, well, do you know if he knows about, is he familiar with this? And he's like, I don't know, probably. But anyhow, so I was able to get in touch with him, and but he's no longer teaching, and he's no longer around. He stepped away and went into kind of seclusion and in that way. So, but I was able to meet with him that day, and or I don't remember. I think it might have been the next day, but we had like a beautiful interaction, and there was a little miracle that took place in that, because it was, I'm kind of, I mean, there was a whole lot more kind of than I just flowed with you, but I was just like, just fire and stuff, that's going on. And I remember, like, very simply, he's just like, hey, it's like, that's not going on, that's not happening in that way, and because it was like I was like all just like consumed in this energy, this energy field of just like almost the way it's just like a fear-based kind of excitement, grandiosity, and just very simply, just like that, it was like boom, like a light switch or something, just went on, or a veil was removed, and that was the way like it was experienced. And it was like I could see the insanity kind of like of the past couple of days. It was like literally like I was being like drugged by my nose, and like in that, and it was like I immediately just kind of snapped out of that, and we both kind of broke down like crying. It was like real beautiful, and was still like back in that peace and presence was still there, and that was there like all throughout. That never really went away, but it was like it was just like the prevalent flow was being caught in that, like sucked into that. And so that was part of it. And sure enough, like I mean, it was just one of those timing things. Was meant to be. Like he had just started at that time, had released a website like a month before, like his YouTube channel was just getting going, which none of that's no longer up. But he had just started teaching like transmutation, and that was the main practice. And that was like one of the big things. Like I had just had these downloads I already mentioned of the, I don't remember how I framed it, but the energetics and the fear-based belief systems having to be, I didn't have the term when it first came in, but essentially that was the term, basically transmuted or processed. And so it was like real, it was like, so here's it, obvious, like boom. And so it was one of,
Sorry, just like how you're describing it, it feels like oscillating between when like all that information and energy is in your mind, in that like mm, not analytical, but like when those downloads come in, it can get like so centralized there. And it sounds like what he did was like release that, and then your whole body was kind of processing this flow. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just kind of what it sounded like.
yeah. I mean, that's one way. That's one way to frame it. Like it, the energy can get stuck up in there. Yeah. There, one of the another way I kind of saw it after the fact was also, it's like you have a lot of like, when you don't have any discernment or energetic kind of discipline, or in that way you're open or vulnerable to different different energy fields and different influences and like psychic attack and
Yeah.
entities in that way, that try to like steer and influence consciousness in a certain flow. And so that's another way I kind of saw it and could see. Um, yeah. So it was like, and still there was that like afterwards. I mean, it wasn't like that. Okay, boom. That was gone in that sense. It was more of like having to develop the awareness of like what's authentic, and what's coming in, and being aware and responsible for one's own energy field and one's own thoughts, in that way, and learning to recognize that when it came in. And so that was very much like the beginning of that process of like, okay. And I didn't have any background in meditation or anything at that time, or like, I mean, I wasn't interested in, like, I wasn't on a spiritual path in that sense, at that time. And so it was like, just didn't really have a choice seemingly in that way. It was like, all right, well, here you are, time to get going. And so that was the start. I ended up getting into A Course in Miracles as well. And yeah, non-duality. He was teaching, my teacher and friend at the time. His name was Andrew. He was teaching, which he was actually younger than me. He's a couple years younger than me. He was teaching from the context of non-dual devotion. And I also got into, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. David R. Hawkins, his work,
Yes.
yeah, devotional non-duality. And so that was, all that was pretty much like out the gate what I got into, and where the, yeah, where like the foundation essentially in that sense. And I started doing, I don't know, a couple weeks after that, got into A Course in Miracles, and that was kind of my introduction into, they call it mind training, and also meditation. That was where I started meditation. I did end up doing some different types of meditation along the way, but that was kind of the introduction into that. So yeah.
Wow, I just recently bought a book called Return to the Heart, I think, by Marianne Williamson. I don't know if you
Mm,
heard of it, but like her kind of digesting A Course in Miracles.
nice. Yeah, I'm familiar with her. I'm not familiar with that one though.
It just came up. Well, I wanted to ask you before if you still get those downloads, because yeah, one way I receive them now is like just through reading. I was reading one book, and where I left off, I picked up a new book because I usually have like six or seven I'm reading, and they just call out to me different times. So I picked up this new book, and it literally like read the last sentence of the other book I put down, and it was talking about Marianne Williamson,
Nice.
and referencing that book, A Return to the Heart. So I always pick up on those signs. I'm like, okay, well, clearly I need to buy this book. Um, so I did, and I've currently lent it to a friend. I felt like I actually received it for her in a sense, but do you still receive those kinds of downloads, maybe in a more discerning way, or how do you see kind of receiving that information?
Let's see. Well, yeah, I mean, in a sense, I still have a lot of connection with reading, as well, and it's very similar to what you just described. Like, I have books up here I just started going back through, and it's like they can click in. It's a whole different level. And when I go back, when I'm called to go back to something, it's just like the obviousness of like, okay. And now it's more like that is, um, a lot of times it's like it's just, it can be verifying, like verifying the context and verifying certain downloads that have already came in a different way. And it's like that'll like just kind of refine the picture. It's like, you've already got the puzzle piece or something, and like but then it's like, it clicks in a better way, and you can see the fuller picture through that.
Yeah. What do you feel like was the biggest message, or what do you feel like is your mission or your purpose in going through this? What are you supposed to share with people?
Mm. Well, I guess I'm I guess I'm still finding that out in a sense, because it's things seem to evolve, and that's one of the biggest things. I think maybe that is the message. It's like the willingness to, um, stay incorporating like the truth and the like what works. And for me, that's forgiveness, and holding that, but also being willing to not stay limited, like, and not try to fit it into just one certain paradigm, because I went through that context a lot, and it was like, okay, this is it, I've got it figured out, and this is like what everything fits into this. And then as soon as I do that, it's like it just I've learned to just stay receptive, but like stay true to yourself, because there's so much out there right now, and that's one of like the most difficult things like I've went through, is like trying, because everybody wants to fit in, right? We want to like have some place to go and be, and the ego still loves like a label and a box, and somewhere that it feels safe and like is its place. And it's it's like, yeah, that's there, but it doesn't really always fit. And what works for everybody and where everybody's at is different. And like we have all these presentations of, even here, it's like if you look at like a certain teacher or a certain teaching as this is it, this is the end all, this is the be all. If that changes, or as soon as something happens that's outside of that parameters, what then? And so it's learning how to be fluid, I guess. Like that's the biggest thing too, is like that. I did a video on that, I think, not too long ago, like the be like water thing. And like water changes. It constantly, it's not just like, because we say be like water and everybody thinks of like a stream or water, but no, water turns into, water solidifies, water turns into gas. It has all these other properties that if you just think of water as the way you think of water, you're missing the entire picture. And also like that, the balance, because here that was another thing too, is like the balance of love and wisdom in a sense, and also the grounding of like being here and being in this reality while also being willing to ascend and see beyond it, and not getting like that, finding that middle way of not getting lost in either, but willing to participate in both. So it's
That
like that's been extremely difficult here, and it's been like, I mean, I've had rug after rug pulled out from under me of like I'm having to be forced to be honest with myself, of like, oh no, you're actually just clinging to this, you're actually just using you like in a certain degree, like, oh yeah, you've got this connection, you've got this wisdom, uh, this piece of source and presence with God, but are you able to move with that wherever and however it needs to go in that sense, and not just latch on in a certain way? And when those, like when you have been doing that, in my experience, and those rugs get pulled out from under you, like not, because I mean the initial here, it's like that's very discouraging and that's very like jarring, but then it's like that's what's needed, and that's what's um like helping to really reorient and see like where, like, okay, where are you really, what's not really completely attuned or in alignment, where are you still, because now I had to be honest too, it's like after all this there's like that, there was like an escapism mentality of like checking out, I'm gonna get nirvana or ascend, or in this way that there's going to be no no like personal individuated like responsibility or involvement in the world. It's like I don't want to deal it, and having to be forced to look at it, where's that coming from? That's not coming from like love, and like there's fear there. You just don't want to deal with it, you just don't want to embrace that, you want to keep that at arm's length, and all that
I think
stuff.
I think I've heard that described as spiritual bypassing.
Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, Sorry, I have so many questions for you, but feel free to like throw them back at me. But as you're talking, it just brings up so many like interesting points and everything you're saying. It's like I have a mirrored kind of like I believe we all mirror each other, and you're like reminding me of parts of myself, and my experience has been a little bit different. But like, I was just recently having a conversation with a friend. I don't know if you work with crystals at all or if you
I
own or
have. I mean, I have like not. I haven't like super specifically. I've had certain. I got a couple in front of me right now. My I still live with well, technically she's not my fiance anymore, but we still live together. And she does. I think you do Reiki, don't you? Or no? Am I wrong?
yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah, okay. I thought I saw it. Yeah, she does as well, and I did a session with her yesterday, and she utilized. I got some crystals up here. She utilized yesterday and stuff
Mm.
with little rose quartz and I don't know, what is this, amethyst and things, and there's a
Yeah.
big thing of selenite over there. So I mean, yeah, that's been important. I've been prompted at different times to wear like bracelets and stuff, different types, stones and that type of healing. Um, I mean, I've had some pretty weird, some weird things with crystals too, but not like affecting me in that way, but like seeing stuff and yeah, I mean, I believe in that. That there's yeah, that's a valid thing.
Oh my gosh, like I just want to ask you so many things. Like probably the most rooted question I have is I don't know about you, but I've met so many people that have gone through this awakening in that time period, 2019, end of 2019, very beginning of 2020. Like a lot of people, when I started jumping into this conversation, that's when and where that happened. And then, like, why do you think certain people have been introduced to this or exposed to this? Like, what makes some people open energetically to experience these things and to, like, be a conduit of this energy and allow this to come through? Do you have a opinion or any guesses on that?
Yeah, I mean, the way I hold it is, I mean, different. You have different, just like as above, so below. In a sense, it's like you have different goals in life and in incarnation. So it's like some are more just like on Earth and in the physical. Some are more uh, structured and oriented towards certain things and certain goals, and like they stick within that parameters. And I think a lot of like people that incarnate and have like the way I look at mine is having this jarring type flow. It's like I can look back and it's like, yeah, I might have had certain like options to like look into certain things a different way at different times, but at the same time it was like not really. Like like I grew up into like fantasy and mystical like sci-fi stuff, and I've heard of Buddhism and enlightenment, and looking back in hindsight, like after all this, it was so odd that like I had never actually looked into those things any more than I had. It was like, well, you were kind of like, why did you? It was almost like it just wasn't allowed, until like a certain point or whatever. And I think there's a lot of people that kind of set it up that way as far as like prior to incarnation. I do believe in that. You kind of have like, this is all right, this is going to be part of it. You're going to have this little, springboard experience or whatever, or like the introduction. And because it's like, it almost has to be that way. It's like if somebody's, yeah, it's like, otherwise would you really stick to it? Would it redefine you in a certain way? Would it have the same pull and impact if it showed up in like a lighter, softer way? Probably not. um, or like given the time period and the context that humanity is going for, like and that's a big part of it too. I mean, there's like whole collective incarnational cycles I believe in, and purposes um,
Mm.
for people incarnating and being involved at the time that they are. So, and a lot of that, some people can remember that and have remembrances of that. Here I don't really have too much of a specific context for that. Certainly, there's like fragments and bits and pieces, but nothing that's really worth speaking on in that way. But that's kind of what resonates and how I hold it and how I've seen it, though.
I can resonate with a lot of that. Like, I studied religious studies in university,
Mm.
just by interest. And I remember always loving going into used bookstores and always being drawn towards like this. I remember one book was called The Quantum and the Lotus, and it was linking Buddhism to quantum, what is that? Quantum mechanics, quantum theory.
Quantum mechanics, yeah.
Yeah, and I never really read it, but I would flip it open sometimes and I would get like little bits of energy, but that was when I was much younger. And the Bible, same thing. Like I would try to read it when I was younger, but it never really did anything until I was going through my awakening, like end of 2019, 2020. Then it was like very similar kind of experience what you were saying, where it was like felt. I was like, are these words in me? Like they're not on the page anymore. They're like it became the easiest book in the world to read. Before that, I couldn't even read a sentence. It just didn't make sense. It was another language. Upanishad, same thing, around the same period. I had been given that book by a friend years ago, tried to read it, nothing. And then yeah, years into like a few years ago, it just it I can't describe like you described it so well. I've tried to put words to that experience. I'm not even kidding. Like it's a very difficult experience to put words to. But it was just it wasn't just a visual like reading words off a page experience. It just made sense. Like it tied everything together. Like all of a sudden, everything made sense from the ground to the sky as I was reading it. The oneness that's spoken. I don't know if that's the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita, another book, but I remember reading one of those and same thing, which makes me want to ask you another question. Um, do you have I don't know if opinion's the right word, but all those spiritual deities that have been here are reincarnated. Buddha, Jesus, um, anyone that's spoken on this lesson of love, unconditional love, who do you believe they were or are? And is it like one collective consciousness? Do you think they're all individual people or I don't know if I'm asking this question in a very good way.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, and I'm actually this. I was just watching. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Robert Gilbert. Um, he's
No.
amazing. But somebody was asking him the same thing. I think it was in his. I remember if it was one him and Aubrey Marcus or the other guy Andre do something that does the Know Thyself one. But anyhow, it's one of those I was watching, and it was for the second time because um, I love he's just so sincere and humble. But he got asked a question like that. I was like, all right, well, you have to start with like because there is truth, like and you've got like absolute highest truth, and then you've got like how that seems to break down and be disseminated, and what that seems to look like all in between. And you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and all that. So on one level, it's like, yeah, that is all the complete one mind and the one source, the one trying to just incarnate on a level to wake up all aspects of the mind and have that experience and to utilize that for the reflect. You were talking about that mirrored reflection in the field earlier and have that mirrored back on that level. So we have those masters that are more of the highest reflection of that in that sense, and they represent the purest connection of that to that absolute source. And but then you've got the varying degrees of that, and you need that because that's especially here, and the way we've already been talking about, the mind's only receptive to what it's receptive to at that level. It can only understand and grasp from that level. And so it's like that's kind of how I hold the masters, is like, yeah, they are that representation, but they're there to represent, that reflection in yourself. And we have these, like, and then in between, it's like, okay, well, you've got different levels of the higher self, the oversoul, whatever you want to refer to that as. And you can have different, like, associations within that, I think, and how the masters in other realms are still involved on a level of support and continuing to support as still, like, because it's like there's a lot of misconceptions I've found and I've went through in my own experience as well when we think of, like, absolute unity and source, and then the individuated consciousness, and how there can still be a sense of the individuated that still doesn't lose and keeps its absolute unity and source connection, but still utilizes the individuation. And
Mm.
and that's part of, like, that's part of the paradox. And I feel like that's part of the embodiment here. And I mean, like, here on this plane, is to, paradoxically embody that without trying to, like, negate one or the other, or cling to one or the other. In that sense, is finding that balance, that middle ground of being willing to, like, fully step in here, but while, like, not as the limited, but to embody the source, but allow the utilization of the individuation. If that makes sense.
Profoundly. Yes. Um, I like, yes, your ability to articulate these things is really something else, is really admirable. Um, and I do have one more question I have to ask you, just because you're the first guy I'm talking to in a very long time, or maybe since I had my YouTube channel, but I also just, like, wanted to give you space because I keep throwing questions at you. If you have anything that, like, you're interested in, because really there's just one question I'm very, very curious about, but
I mean, right now, I'm going back and re-exploring a few things. So it's like, that really is it, right? Is what I was just talking about. I'd say is like that, because I spent so much time, I feel like, out of balance. It's like like trying to negate the individuated, and, like, almost not embrace that at all. Because it's like, oh no, that's bad. That's like, the worldly, like, you gotta be done with that, and get that out of here, and not, like, you don't want any of that persona or whatever. um and yeah, the folly in that, but then, like, seeing, okay, well, like, what is the authenticity, the authenticity of this expression, like, okay, what, because there's no accidents, like, the divine, the source, is utilizing, like, every bit of that, every bit of your desire, every bit of your personal preferences, of, like, all that has its place and fits in. And so it's like, yeah, following that and learning how to, like, be true to myself in that, and really seeking, like, whatever avenue that, like, that's really true to. And, like, here, I've just recently gone back into certain information and certain teachings that I would have shunned, and I did shun for years, because it's just like, oh, that's too heady, that's too intellectual, that's too whatever. One of the big ones lately, I went back to the Book of Knowledge, the Keys of Enoch. Don't know if you're familiar with that, but that one is like that one. You are, yeah. And that one really just like, it was like, oh, okay, well then this just boom, boom, boom. It was like you're talking about. I went back. I've had the book for years. I've went through it, and it was just like, whatever. And then going back through it now, it was just like, oh, well, boom, 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 boom. This is like connect the dots of the puzzle piece, and they just fall into place. And it's like that. You're just talking about. Also, I was going to use the word gnosis. That gnosis is that like the scripture and the stuff doesn't really make sense until that's actually uh, that is the experience, and that knowledge is experiential. Um, and that is that Gnosticism. And until then, it's really that's
Mhm.
just the nature of the beast, so to speak. You're subject to the ego will just latch on in its own ways to spiritual concepts and ideologies and have its own interpretation and prematurely attempt to make that its experience or negate the need for that experience. That's another term I heard Robert Gilbert reference again. He used that term premature purification. And I found in my own experience, there's a lot of that has went on. And it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, everybody can be super spiritual and super happy in this given context and in this removed setting. And in this, if you create a bubble, a spiritualized bubble for yourself, like, yeah, that's going to be all just nice and light and peaceful. But is that really like, is that maintainable? Is that sustainable? Is that what you're really actually here for? Is that actually authentic? Is that you? Or is that really, are you really just like really using a lot of force to try to maintain and keep that up?
I do not feel like I'm at the place where I know everything to stay in my. I'm sure people do get there where like solitude is the answer and you've learned all the lessons you're meant to in this lifetime. But I believe that in
Well, I
order,
think a lot of that's premature.
yeah, well, and it's in our relationships and our connections where we see those aspects of ourselves, right? Like we can't really grow. I mean, to the fullest extent, just being alone. Because, yeah, I can make myself happy, but it's really in meeting other people and having them mirror shadow aspects that we can see where our wound and where our ego is activated and the parts of us that do need to have a little light shone on and
Mhm.
are meant to feel. Um, man, everything. Okay, can I ask you this question? Because even
Yeah.
as you're talking, it's making me want to ask you that. Um, Something I've been really, really invested and interested in the last couple of years is the concept of divine masculine and divine feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that I was hopping on with you today and knowing that I haven't really spoken to a male on here, I'm very, very curious what your perspective is. And you said you live with a partner, so I'm also curious, like, is there a sense or a feeling you have being in like in a feminine presence? Does that allow you to open up parts of the masculine essence within yourself, divine masculine essence in yourself? Or how familiar or how much have you worked with kind of this concept of divine masculinity and femininity?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar with it. I used to work with a concept called the sacred marriage. And so, yeah, and there's, needless to say, a lot of distortion there. And I think that's a big part of the work is that you've gotten just the way that society's been set up. It's, you've had a lot of dark masculine energy and authority and repressed feminine, I'm just going to say, yeah, repressed feminine, divine feminine energy. And so that's a huge part of the, to say like the collective transmutative flow. That there's no way around that. There's no escaping that. And there's so much, in my experience, of like repression mechanisms that we can go through to try to like not face that or not open up or to like like I was just using the reference of like the bubble of like almost like, because it's out of fear, it's like when you really get and look into that, it can be really heavy, it can be really deep, even like you want to try to pretend you get to a space where you don't see. That's also like this false idea of unity, right? Like yeah, like I'm aware, you're a female, like I'm a male. You're attractive. I can see that. Does that like is that is there energy that comes up in association with that? Yeah, that still comes up. That's still a part of it. Like that's a part. Like you were talking about the relationship type flows. I think there's a huge disservice and immaturity still in the collective and like the old kind of masculine based negation that comes from more of like the reclusive Buddhist or like hermit style context of like avoiding that, and a lot of that's still very prevalent. I mean that's like heavily from Eastern traditions infiltrated Western flow. And because like everybody here mostly lives as householders and is involved in the world. Like I was never going to be a reclusive monk. I was never going to go take like a vow of celibacy. Like these things are still uh,
Interesting.
and it's like to try to like incorporate it from the perspective of what that context of where that would be negated or where that wouldn't be a part of life is going to lead and does lead and has led in my own experience to very weird energy suppression and not facing that, and then that causes it's going to come up. Like it's going to come up if you're not meant. And that's the thing about that premature creation of that bubble. If it's not meant to be at that time, guess what happens? That bubble will burst. and,
Yeah.
and then it's like, all that's going to be there to be faced. And, I think more and more like as a collective and like within spiritual communities, there are people that are really stepping into that. I mean, and you can just see that it doesn't work well. It doesn't work well in that context. And we also like you see that then it's like the demonization of the guru archetype of like these like false just say like expectations of like, okay, just because this person has this level of attainment or spirituality, like they're not going to have any worldly interactions in that way.
Or
And
family, yeah,
yeah,
experience.
exactly. It's like, oh, heaven forbid a spiritual teacher or guru start dating, like having sex. Like, oh my God, that's then they're done. Burn them
Balance a
up.
relationship.
Yeah, burn them on the stake. And so it's like, all that's there and prevalent in the field. And I've got some friends that are speaking on this from the feminine context in a big way, and it's like I mean, you see it out there. I mean, you've got the dark masculine seems to be what's been like the big flow in the collective of humanity, and like that, that's the whole like down with the patriarchy type thing. And it's like, yeah, it's like that's got its time, but then there's also I mean, you've got heavy dark feminine influences. You've got the way that flows, and so it's like you got both. And it's also we've got a lot of judgment around just like self-expression and the misinformation. And I like to deal with the concepts of like the luciferic and the Ahrimanic. And the way I frame that is like, the luciferic is like the complete freedom of individuated expression. And obviously there's distortions with that. There's like horrible because then that's like what goes entirely one direction and would just self-service, and that's it. That's all it's about. And then the Ahrimanic is the attempt to restrict, control, label that, keep that refined in that paradigm. And so you get into a place of like, it's that egoic battle of like one trying to harbor the other. And it's like, and the spiritual communities, I think they've done a huge, well, not all, but like a huge disservice of, because you can see where the complete not wanting to embrace the harmonic or plan or look at and label has just really seemed to allow the dark masculine to be what is perfectly what is imperfectly what is perfectly desirable of utilizing both the luciferic and the harmonic for its purposes. And that's how you got what seems to be the presentation of like the world as it has been. And a lot of that's like been exposed, I think, recently, is coming to light. You got, I don't like to go into conspiracy and stuff. Well, that's not entirely true. I do like to go into conspiracy some, but yeah, I mean, you can obviously see where it's like, oh yeah, that there has been these powers and these beings, people that do have the capacity to influence and orchestrate things in a certain way. And until like that's the whole learning to really be embodied and utilize that source, but like put it into action here on this plane, until the light's really able to be the light and do that in that way. It's like you get more of the same. And that's that imbalance, I think, of not really, it ties in because you've also got direct correlations between that luciferic energy and the harmonic energy of, they correlate with the feminine and masculine energies as well, and what would express and form versus what would just be reserved and not involved with it on that level.
I'm not familiar with those two terms, the luciferic and harmonic, but I'll look into it after. My view on it is kind of like, or I've experienced a lot of embodying both within, kind of trying to define what divine masculine is in myself and what the divine feminine is in myself, and those darker aspects, kind of bringing a light and an awareness to it, because I want to believe, I'm very optimistic that as a society we'll get to the point where everybody can kind of be a divine balance of both. And so I just try to like take the onus on myself to work on those, but that's probably what you meant by those terms, or there's probably an element to that and I'm just not familiar with it. It seems that we've had some similar experiences, but I am going to try to keep this to an hour with the intent that we get to meet again. I'm curious, in case this gets published and people get to listen to it, I have a lot of very astrologically leaning people, and I'm very curious what your zodiac is if you feel like sharing it, and I can share mine.
uh I'm a Cancer.
Are you?
Yeah.
Cancer. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a Leo.
Okay.
But yeah, do you have any final, is there any messages if people are to listen to this, anything you'd want to put out there?
Hmm. I'd say the main thing is like really learn to trust yourself and look at all, be willing to really face all that fear and see where that's coming from, and be honest with yourself about that. And uh, stop trying to, well, just look at it. And even if it seems to be out there and all that, like, just come back to the source, come back to the truth of what you are.
Beautifully said. Fear, isn't it? Fear is really the enemy of fear itself. False
Mm,
evidence appearing real.
yeah. Yeah, one of my favorite Zen quotes. Dr. Hawkins used to reference it all the time. All fear is illusion. Walk through no matter what.
Mm.
He said there's one Zen saying that'll take you all the way, and that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Your initial kind of uh, interest, or I don't know how it happened for you, how you got involved, or if you'd always kind of been on the spiritual path. I know some people kind of had that leaning always or whatever.
Yeah, similar timeline, 2019. Probably before that, I was living in China and I got kicked out of the country. And it was a very traumatic experience. And at that time, I was as much suffering from PTSD as I was going through like an awakening where all these things were coming through. Very similarly, I could have been institutionalized easily at that time. So much was coming through. I remember picking up the Bible one day and just like the whole energy of the room went dark. Like I just all of a sudden knew I couldn't look, like it was heavy spiritual attacks and things were like, yeah, wildly changing. And I do have videos talking about some of those things. Like, um, I was blessed with having a couple of friends who reached out and saw what I was going through. So I did have someone to talk to. I also found the only therapist in my hometown that had a PhD. I just knew I needed to look for someone who could handle me, I felt like at that time. And he had an extensive wait list, but he got me in right away. I don't know if he thought my case was interesting or what happened, but I'm very grateful for him. And yeah, at the time, one of my friends was exploring, I guess, shamanism and plant medicine, and that was helpful, I will say. I don't know if all of it was necessary at that time. I think I was very, very open, and I'm not sure becoming more and more open was the healthiest practice at that time, but that's one of the reasons why I wrote a book, which is on like energy protection. It's all the tools kind of I wish I knew when that was all starting. And then I just wrote it last year, kind of at the end of, or where I feel like I have a stronger grasp of that knowledge or things that I've shared with others that have helped them. Um, because I do think up to this point, anyways, one of my messages is that protection. I'm sure it's going to change. I'm sure. Uh, yeah, I would say like end of 2019 and then up until now, it's kind of still my journey. I'm still just evolving and going with it and meeting awesome people and talking and I'm kind of at the point where I feel like people that are meant to find these messages will find it and I'm just here to share the experience, I guess.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you got into like the shamanism and energy work and stuff in that book.
Um like at the
But just
beginning.
like in general, because you were talking about, I don't know how you mentioned like the protection. You did the, so I don't know what kind of like what the background is on that.
Yeah, I guess um how to be a little bit more discerning when that energy is opening up and when we're uh yeah, just starting to learn how to work with it. And it's all four levels, like the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual boundaries, for example, is just a basic physical um practice that I think I was meant to learn regardless of going through a spiritual experience in my 30s because I wasn't taught that when I was younger, and that's something I kind of wish I knew in that journey as well. And then like on an emotional or mental aspect, just kind of how to be a little bit more discerning with the people you surround yourself with and how that can have a role, and just maybe some mental practices that help keep your energy kind of clear within yourself and understanding who you are. Yeah, just some practices around that that I learned when I was doing my like sound frequency training and Reiki and coaching and kind of all that stuff that like is helpful along the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I had like a crash course in I spent like years in just like the transmutative kind of non-dual flow, that masculine bubble. I didn't go into this, but like last year there was like a big shift, like it, yeah, a little, I guess a little over a year ago, and this was it was more of like a feminine breakthrough. It's kind of like I was talking about the bubble bursting. That was the bubble bursting. It's like, all right, well, you're not gonna just stay in this, little masculine bubble. You've got to integrate the, the feminine. I can't do that word, femininity. Of like, and I relate that to like the individuated kind of expression and form and flow of that into life, and that liveness, that yeah, that, and so it was yeah, there was a lot of bad habits of like almost like from that bubble perspective of embracing, like being willing and able to embrace everything, and like transmute, like allow any energy to come through and transmute in that sense. But then there's like that discernment of like, okay, well then once you open yourself up completely to a new level, it's like that can go on ad infinitum. And it's just gotta have that discernment and that grounding of like what's yeah what is like authentic, and what are you actually allowing and inviting into your field in that way. And I feel like this year's been like a friggin' crash course for me of yeah, really being forced to look at all those things and see like what's there, and what's aligned, what's not.
This year has been intense.
It has. Yeah.
Like, I feel like,
Yeah, I
well,
went through like a dark, dark, dark underworld journey. In that sense, it's very yeah,
in this year.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Earlier this
Oh
year,
man.
yeah, it's intense.
I feel like so many of my karmic patterns are kind of still coming to a head, but this whole year has been like I kept seeing this vision of like roots being uprooted and cleansed off before being planted back on the ground in the ground all year, especially the first half of the year. And I really feel like that's a metaphor for this year. We've been like uprooted, given a look at like what our core is. Like these are your beliefs, these are the things you've like to our core kind of given us a chance to look at and then replant them in the way that we want to. It's been hugely not easy. It's not easy at all, but it will be. It'll be very benevolent next year, I believe.
Yeah, it's always worth it. So it's like you can't put it off in that sense. Is what I've seen. It's like, and that's yeah, that's huge here. It's like I guess you can't see it until you can see it. Some things it's like, especially the you're not trying to the depths, that you're trying to keep things away and trying to not really look inside and see like, okay, what's really still here, and acknowledge that. And we're not getting away from that. We're not meant to in any way. You're not meant to like find a certain spiritual community or bubble to where you don't have to. It's like you have to have your own journey. You can't utilize anybody else's that's another reference that I heard somebody say. It was like everybody has to have their own prodigal son journey, and like actually you can't vicariously go through somebody else's. You can only ride the master's coattails so far. And
Mhm. So relevant. So relevant, especially like relationship wise for me. I've met so many people that this is a recent conversation I was having with a friend is like we meet people that we believe are so similar or have been on the same journey as us, and then you get to the point where you realize it was just a mirrored energy. They were mirroring like our experiences, and when it gets to the point where they need to be as authentic and vulnerable and open up, they kind of run away.
yep.
But it's I feel like it's a cool time to be here right now because those things are becoming like people are becoming aware of it, and those that have really done this work on themselves are being able to recognize and see that in others. And I think that's so fair and so, I don't know if deserved is the right word, but it does feel like we're moving into like a time of peace and justice and like there's some, yeah, redemption, or I don't know what the word is, but recognition for the work that's been done.
Mm.
Um, Again, I'm annoyingly optimistic is what my friends say. So maybe I'm
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, it's like I had to acknowledge a lot of the darkness and stuff this past year and see that because that was a part of the big unfoldment. But it's even like that. It's like only it's gotta come to light. I mean, all that, and that's the beauty of it. That doesn't mean it's like bad or wrong or going in the wrong direction. That means it's exactly where it's supposed to be. It's perfect. I think, yeah, I think too. I think the Course of Miracles. There's a part in the pamphlet in the back, and it's just the manual for teachers, and there's a part. I think it's called the what is it, period of achievement or something. I think you made me think of that reference. That's what it is.
Did you read the whole thing?
Yeah, I did the course for
Wow.
a couple of. Yeah, I did the course, the workbook for like 2.5, 3 years. I used to teach, do like programs and stuff, and teach from that. I don't really speak on that. I mean, I still live that. I know a reference forgiveness that ties in. I relate transmutation and forgiveness as the same in the fullness of what they are. They have, there's subtle differences, but I think the two are hand in hand the same. Um, and I don't speak really. I don't feel called to speak entirely from that context anymore. But maybe
Hmm.
that'll change. Who knows?
Something I picked up, but I never got too far through it. I don't know. I don't know if this is a call to read it again. I don't think so. I think I meant to read that synopsis by Marianne Williamson at some point, but
Nice. Yeah, I like. I've been going back through the Way of Mastery. That's like gonna kind of. I mean, it's not all accepted because it came through a different individual, but and I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but it was a different channeling, um, which I find very very in line and more of a blend, a better blend of the. I see the course as kind of being more of like the masculine wisdom aspect in a certain sense, kind of more towards that. Um, I see the Way of Mastery is that it expands and uses the course language in a sense, but it's more of that sacred marriage, you could say, of incorporating the feminine and the masculine together.
oh, I will look into that. The Way of Knowledge, you say?
The Way of Mastery,
The Way of Mastery.
yeah, and then there's the Way of Transform. They usually come together. It's the Way of Mastery is the first one, and then there's the Way of Transformation and the Way of Knowing.
Wow. I'm also optimistic that there'll be more conversations. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have so many questions for you after this. I know it. I'll like let it settle for a couple days and then I'll be like, oh, I should have asked him this.
yeah. Feel free to shoot me a message or whatever. I'm always open. I haven't been I've been wanting to actually started with intentions of doing like some talks and kind of just more like like this, but just more because I've been in a situation I spoke to and been in contact and had quite a few teachers that I'm still in contact. They have bigger followings, and for whatever reason, I found myself in a position to where they are comfortable confiding in me and sharing, their more personal stuff. And it's like, I see that doesn't always get put out there. And it's not because they're like, just trying to not, but it's just the context and the environment and the group that they're speaking in front of is calling forth a certain, different flow. And but I see the limitation in that to a degree because then it can give like there's unrealistic expectations and presentations are still there, and and are being, not like that it's being intentionally presented in that way, but that's how it's there, and presented nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, and some things are just meant to stay that way, right? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Intentionality is everything to me. So if we set the intention to make our conversations be something that is shareable, I believe we can do that because I'm just really grateful to be speaking with a masculine presence. It blew my mind this morning thinking that. I was like, how have I not spoken to a man on these topics yet? And so that's very valuable. And I knew before speaking to you it was going to be a very valuable connection. And yeah, I'd be very grateful to continue this. And if we have questions along the way, or if it evolves and people have questions along the way, like, so I love that your name is Way. This is just, it's very cool.
Send me your because I guess it's not the same as your Instagram, your YouTube channel.
Okay, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. I tried to. I don't know. I don't get on Instagram too much. You might have it linked on there, but I didn't. I don't think I found it.
I don't think I've changed it yet. My Instagram just changed to intuitive empowerment. It might still be intuitive guidance
Okay. Because there's
on
a
you.
different, yeah, there's an intuitive power. I found there's a guy that has intuitive empowerment, and I thought it was you, and I was like, wait, this is a black guy.
Uh, close.
Let's the shapeshifter. I don't know.
Nah, I just changed mine like within the last month. I was intuitive guidance for a while, but then I kind of had this awareness of, hey, I'm not anything more or anything less. I just want to be seen as like same plane and yeah, empower people to just to do the same things that I do. Not I'm teaching you how to do it or I'm guiding you. Just let's and all of my clients become my friends. So it just felt like the natural progression. But like, thank you for bringing that to my attention because I don't think I've changed my YouTube handle yet. So I'll add that to my list today.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
Man, what a, yeah, I'm very grateful for
Yeah,
your
me too.
time
I know.
today.
Yeah, I knew it was gonna be fun. It's like,
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have more questions for you, but I think these ones have to percolate first.
where you at? Where are you located?
I'm in Canada. I'm
Okay.
in Alberta. How about you?
I'm in South Carolina, near the beach, near Myrtle Beach.
North Carolina. I want to ask you so badly, but I don't know if this is going to be shared.
What's that?
Your election was yesterday, right? This morning.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. I saw that. I didn't know until this morning. I woke up. It's like, okay. I, you know, that's a whole topic. I mean, there's a lot. I don't like to go into that because it's like, um,
That's what I mean. I don't think
that's
I'll
not
bring
that's not entirely true. I say that, and again, I catch myself and say I don't like that, and it's like, I know there's an aspect that loves that, but yeah, it's
I think we'll get there
yeah,
collectively. In the next couple of years, it'll be more comfortable to,
yeah. I
well,
think
hopeful anyways.
there's a lot of stuff out there. Stuff's just not as it seems, and there's a lot of false presentations and different avenues, and people like their own self deceptions in a certain way and go to great lengths to keep those up, and
Mm.
that's the nature of the ego. And um, I do think we're at a point of a lot coming to light, and a lot of that, unfortunately, what needs to be brought to the light is, not always the prettiest, lightest things. And so, I do think we're at a period of where a lot of that will kind of unfold very rapidly and quickly, and it'll be quite shocking for a lot of people. But and I do think that ties into, yes, like with the people in the time period of everybody's like awakenings and stuff. I think there is like a big purpose for a lot to kind of go ahead and be grounded in a certain way for when certain shifts or things transpire on a more bigger, broader level, that there's that availability and support system available for those that are wanting or needing in that way.
Oh, so beautifully said. It's like I could see that a couple of years ago or 3 years ago that that was like the reasoning behind what was going on, but now you're right, like it does feel very intentional, the timing of everything happening, and I think the most important energy or what I was feeling from that is just to have compassion, like while things come to light and while things are upheavaled. And I think that people are already doing such a good job of that, to be honest. Like that almost makes me emotional. It's like they're prepared. Like my heart was just so full, just feeling people's energy yesterday and today. And yeah, I think acceptance and grace and compassion are going to be very important to have for the
Yeah,
upcoming times.
yeah, exciting times.
Thank you. You did answer that question with in a yeah, thank you. Well,
Yeah,
shall I let you get on with your day?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty free today. My schedule, so probably go hit the gym.
Sounds nice. Is it hot there? What's the weather like over
Not
there?
cool yet. It's still for here. I mean, it doesn't get too cold, but it's actually still relatively. What is it out there today? It's relatively warm for this time of year. Oh wow, yeah, 77 out there
Yeah,
right
that
now. So I'm right down from the beach. I can still go to the beach right now this time of year. So that's kind of cool.
not wow. 77. I don't know what that is in Canadian degrees, but it sounds hot. Sounds warmer than here. I think we're at
It's
like 1, but
oh wow. One, I think that was that zero. So yeah, I can't do the Celsius conversions either. But I think that's 32. That's like close. I think zero is freezing, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, that's Fahrenheit. That's 32 degrees.
32?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
It is warm there.
yeah.
Jeez, yeah, we had snow when I woke up yesterday. Probably still have some, but
Nice, nice. Yeah,
well,
we might get snow here once every 4 years or something.
seriously?
Yeah, yeah. The upstate South Carolina is a little different. They probably get it at least once a year or something like that. And yeah, no higher elevations, but keep it. But, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, such good energy you have, and such an honor, and yeah,
yeah. Too.
blessing to be here.
I'll send you Danielle. She's got a channel too, and y'all are very like y'all's flow and what y'all are into is like very similar as well. Cool.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll send you a message with the YouTube information too, but feel free to reach out anytime as well.
All right. Likewise, I appreciate it.
Okay, I appreciate your time today.
You too.
We'll talk again soon.
All right. Peace and love.
Okay, peace and love. Bye.
Bye.